Regular board meeting for August 26, 2019. We've already begun at 6 p.m. with our call to order, pledge of allegiance, roll call, and our closed session. We're now out of closed session. We're into agenda additions. I have two additions. One is under other for number 4.
We've got to delete number 2.
Oh, number 2 has been deleted.
Oh, okay.
The subject is MPART Community Advisory Board Representative.
Then I had proposed number 3 for resolutions and ordinances, Resolution 2019-26, the resolution regarding opt-out of recreational marijuana.
Are there any other agenda additions or changes? All right, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I move we approve this agenda with the 2 modifications that we've added.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Byer, support by Ms. McGuire. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, the agenda's set. Next, we enter into a public hearing for the truth in taxation.
All right,
I make a motion, we go into the public hearing regarding truth in taxation.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Weed, support by Ms. McGuire. Roll call?
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. We're now in the public hearing.
all right. So the previous Township Board meeting on the 12th of August, there was a resolution passed to hold this public hearing, and it is regarding the truth in taxation. And so the assessor, Ms. Schweikert, put together the revenue projections. All of those were shared at the, actually in June, and then at the first 2020 budget work session. And so all of those revenue projections are based on levying the maximum allowable millage for 2020. And the board has to have this public hearing to be able to do so. The maximum allowable millage rate is 5 mills for a charter township, and due to the Headley rollback, the maximum allowable is 4.6808 mills, as detailed in the packet. I'm sorry, 4.69 mills. Based on that, this is something that is presented to the board every year. It is a timing issue to be able to file with the county as far as the maximum millage. And Mrs. Schweikert also detailed in the packet the amount of money we would lose if we did not have this public hearing and levy the maximum amount of levy.
The 2019 taxable value for Oscoda Township increased by 2.2%. So as a result, the township's operating millage revenue would also increase by the same percentage. And as Mr. Schaefer indicated, in order for the township to actually receive that revenue, you have to have a truth and taxation hearing to inform the public that the township will be receiving additional revenue if it levies the maximum authorized millage. I would like to point out that this millage is not an increase. It is the same millage rate that has been levied for several years. The average, a home that had a value of $100,000, levying the maximum authorized millage would result in approximately $1.62 more in taxes, as opposed to the rollback that you could not levy without this hearing. Are there any questions from the board on this?
We have to do this every year,
Ye-
effectively.
Yes. Anytime that a government entity is going to receive more money than it received the previous year, you have to have a truth and taxation hearing.
How does the 2.2 raise in evaluation compare to other years?
Last year, we had a truth and taxation hearing. I do not recall off the top of my head what the percentage was, but last year was the first time since approximately 2010 that we had actually had a truth and taxation hearing. What had been happening in the past, once the market values crashed, is we had several years where our taxable values were actually decreasing, so we were receiving less revenue than the previous year, so this hearing was not necessary.
So there was an upward bump last year and again this year.
Correct. Market value trends have been increasing, and as a result, the taxable values have been increasing.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other comments from the board? All right. Do we have any comments from the public? All right, back to the board. Any comments?
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Support.
Motion by Ms. McGuire, support by Mr. Palmer. Roll call?
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Palmer.
Yes.
Ms. McGuire.
Yes.
Mr. Byer.
Yes.
Mr. Cummings.
Yes.
Mr. Gasky.
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, we are now out of the public hearing. We're now into our first public comment period. For this comment session, there is a comment card that needs to be filled out and turned into the superintendent. There's a 4-minute time limit, and when you come up, please introduce yourself. Do we have any cards?
We do. The first I have is Ray Mayati. Myatt. Concerning Loud Drive at Oscoda Avenue.
Yes. I took some pictures. I'd like to you guys to take a look at it, if you would, please. I know that Mr. Wee has been out to investigate, and probably the rest of you haven't. That's a fair assumption, correct? Okay. The concern is a road that runs in front of my house, an alleged road. The road is not developed. It was plotted on a plot around 1911, I think it was. It's never been used. I bought my property in 2000, and I did what I feel a pretty comprehensive investigation of what was going to happen with that road. I found it on the county plot maps, so I went and talked through it with a lot of people, and I talked through it with the superintendent of Oscoda at the time, or Oscoda Township, whatever it may be. I also took the time to go down to the county offices. Everybody that I talked to at that time assured me that nothing was going to happen to this road. They said the laws have changed. The DEQ, the DNR was very stringent on these issues. It was way too close to the water line, and you have nothing to worry about. I can't tell you how many times I heard that. And I bought this property. I put an offer contingent on acceptable survey, and I did my homework on this whole issue. Now I understand that I have a neighbor that is not a part of my subdivision, by the way, of the Oscoda Beach plat, that wants to run a sewer line across the front of my property on this unexistent road. And I'm a little disturbed about that. because I think it could have the effect of several things. One, decreasing my property values if I want to sell it. If you guys were to approve this, as I understand engineering type of things, okay, they could come through, decide what they need to do from an engineering perspective, put in clean outs, if not pump stations, in front of my place. I didn't sign up for any of this, okay? And I think it's kind of absurd, and I don't normally come to these kind of things and speak out of neighbor. I like to be a good neighbor to my people. Here are my neighbors, drink beer with them on the beach, all that kind of fun stuff. But this has kind of really got my goat, big time. I also understand this individual has hired a lawyer and is going to shove it down, my perspective only, shove it down my throat, Don Block's throat, and maybe even the township or the city if required to do so. I'm prepared to hire a lawyer too and fight back. Myself and Don talked to a lawyer this afternoon. I want to make clear to you guys, I don't want to do any of this. I want to go home, I want to enjoy my beach, my kids, have fun, play in the water. I don't want any of this. Okay, but I'm prepared to go as far as I have to go to resolve this.
Tell me again why this neighbor of yours wants to do this?
He has, okay, backing up a little bit, this is the former Bob Pax. I know he was a pretty popular guy in Oscoda and passed about 2 years ago.
Yes.
I knew him, I liked him myself. We were decent neighbors to each other. His children sold the place earlier this year, and an individual bought it knowing that there were multiple defects with this property. A zoning issue, which I understand the board, I support resolving this zoning issue for him. Okay, that's reasonable. Okay, but he bought this place knowing that there was a septic tank issue. Okay, the septic was failing when he bought it. I'm sure it was well documented. He bought it anyway knowing this. I've lived on a septic system my entire life. As a kid, I helped my dad put in one. I've since put in 2 new homes in homes that I built and contracted myself. Septics are a non-issue. It's very simple. If you have the soil that perks, it's nothing. Okay, entire Oscoda is sand. Everything is going to perk, almost everywhere. There's no reason this gentleman can't put in a septic system on his property. He's got a large lot, 200 feet of beachfront, comes back way deeper than my place, and he owns, I don't know how many acres, but it's quite an excessive parcel going up the street, which he could also utilize to connect to the sewer somewhere else. But instead, he's decided to come across my property, which is maybe cheaper and easier for him. Okay? I got a lot more things I could say, but I see my time is up.
Well, my question ate up some of your time. It's
Okay.
not your fault. So.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I was
Understand your
out to the
concern.
property though too, just so you know.
Okay. The reason I printed those, I mean, I'm sucking up a little more of your time, is I wanted you guys to realize how close the water is to Loud Drive.
Right.
It's feet. When I mow the weeds and the grass out in front of on the beach, I got about 2 passes with my tractor to where the stake is to where it's wet. And the water since rose today. With the wind, the water's even higher.
All right. Next, we have Don Block, 4830 Osable Street.
Good evening. I'm going to follow up the conversation. I'm Ray's neighbor. And the gentleman who we're talking about has purchased this property. There are other options besides putting in a new septic system. He could run between his property. He owns all of the property up to 23, which is a sewer line. So he could run that way. It's a lot longer and probably more expensive. But he was aware of the issues when he bought his property. His problem should not become our problem. He's not part of our subdivision. I've barely even met the man, but we adamantly do not want a trench and a culvert running in front of our property between us and the beach. This year alone, as you all know probably, even today, the water has come closer to my property 100 feet. There's only about 15 feet left of the beach between the water's edge and this Loud Avenue undeveloped. Who's to say next year the water continues to rise? Could be 20 feet, could be another 100 feet. If that happens, there's major issues, and I'm sure, again, the DNR and DEQ going to have similar concerns that I have of what happens when this water flows over this trench with a culvert in it. So a large concern on both Ray and I also bought my property, did my homework, was told the same thing, that this Loud Avenue, we call it the imaginary Loud Avenue, nothing was going to happen. It's never been a road. In fact, we've been to the road commission. They don't even have it listed as a road. So I would ask you, if this comes forward, it seems like it's going to, because the person who's asked for this variance is not accepting the decision that's been made already, I'm told. So if it continues to come forward, I'm asking you, as property owners, as representatives of us, to keep in mind, this is our property, this will affect the value of our homes down the road, and it will affect, potentially, a great effect could be on the lake itself, because it's going to be either in the water or under the water's edge because of what's happening. And if you saw the waves crashing today, you know there's issues, and there's going to continue to be, from what I'm told. So I ask that you consider that when and should it come to a vote. I'm not privy to the plans, but there's only one way from where the sewer ends at the end of our street, Oscoda Street, to get over to this person's, and that's right across our property. So not a good thing for us. You know, I maintain, Ray maintains this property. We mow it, we rake it, we clean it, and we've been doing that I've been doing it for 10 years. Ray's probably doing it for 20 years. And we want to keep the beach in its natural state and a natural environment. Regardless of what anybody says, if you build a trench and you're going to have to go down X amount of feet, I don't know what that is, it's going to affect the beach, it's going to affect the erosion, it's going to affect the environment, it's going to affect us. So I guess the bottom line is I would just like to reiterate, I don't have any hard feelings against the individual. I know he has some issues, but he has options. There's multiple options what he could do to address his concerns, his problems, without making his problems our problems, because that's going to what happen if this were to move forward and this were to be approved. So I ask you, when and if it comes to that you vote no. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Any other cards?
Questions?
Do have Mr. Mark Miller about the EDC, Mama Traverse City Assessor, Police Radar Useful Life.
Thank you, Dave. Just wanted to follow up on 2 weeks ago for your EDC or EIC. I think you need 2 experienced business people on it. I don't know if you're going to be able to get a rainmaker for $100K. And I dropped the references from the ads. Rainmakers are going to have sea level references. I'm going to the Mama at Traverse City. I'm probably one of the few people in Oscoda County who's worked on commercial and military satellites. I did 4 years at Hughes Aircraft in El Segundo, and I think Mr. Tim did 4 years at Radar Systems Group. What else? For the assessor last week, I think you still need to go out for a bid given the dollar value. And the police radar, is it broken, or does the chief just want a new radar? I know that the bulletproof vests fail over so many years, but if the radar guns still work and are legit for traffic matters, I'd say hold off. And on the bike trail, I attended the 2 meetings. I suggest going forward. They put the meetings on their calendar on the website. And these are just minor things. One, I really appreciate the amount of information you provide on your website for the meetings. Unfortunately, today I had problems printing stuff out, even after I rebooted my computer. And this may be on my end, but I noticed that some of your critical meetings, like the one this Wednesday, are not on the community calendar. And the last thing is, I'm going up to NEMCOG Wednesday, and I just printed out this information for your community. And I'm not too sure if those are audited numbers, budgeted numbers, but it's the county, the township, Oscoda, and East Tawas. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any others?
We do. We have the Superintendent Scott Moore, gratitude and support.
Good evening. I want to come and express gratitude and support. I've had the opportunity to talk to Mr. Weed and Mr. Schaefer already about my desire to communicate with you guys. I know I sent a written correspondence in reference to the donation that you gave us in regards to all the equipment from the community center. I want you to know that we have a room all set for it, and we're moving things in within the next 2 weeks or so. Everything should be set up for our students and our staff, and then we've also got it in a location where we would be happy to work with any township people who wanted to come in and work that out. We're very grateful. We're going to turn this equipment into a recycled use that will benefit the community, so we thank you very much for that. In addition to that, I also want to thank you for having the initiative to get a community resource officer, school resource officer that we've had the opportunity to work with for the past 6 months or so. And in that time, there's been a lot of consideration into how this role should look and what it should do. I just want to give you a little history of what transpired so far in regards to this position, just so everybody has an understanding of where we're at and where we're going and where we're headed. First and foremost, we tried to get some training. The quickest training that we could procure was in this summer. And we sent our staff, and then also in addition to that, the township police officer came, and we went to a specific training on school resource officers. Prior to that, though, our community resource officer was able to do several things, including working on cases involving narcotics, including vaping, child predators, several instances of physical aggression where they're transpiring in the classroom, because while I'm grateful, we also need support, because the kids in this next generation that's coming up has more challenges than any that I've seen in my career, and I'm humbled because a lot of people who have a lot more years of service than I have would contend and convey the same message, I believe. The children have more things at their disposal than ever before, and it's our job to equip them and do our best. So we thank you for your support as we go ahead with that. In addition to that, I want to also thank you each for your willingness to serve. The issues that each of you are facing are tremendous. I just sit here and I think, man, it's a tough job that each of you have, and it's a thankless job, but I thank you for your support. And want the community to know that we're thankful for support. In the time that we've been fortunate enough to pass our last millage, our sinking fund millage, about 7 years ago, we've twice been recognized as a reward school, experiencing more growth than 95% of all the other schools in the state of Michigan. That's like winning a championship. Our extracurricular programs in that 7 years have garnered more accomplishment than any time in decades. We're very blessed by the support that we've been given, and this is a great community to be in. And on the horizon, there's a lot that's in front of us, and we're looking forward to combating those challenges together. I want to congratulate you on the fire millage that just transpired, and I think that it's good, and it's a sign that our community supports those who are in service. And as we're grappling with challenges, I know that there's a lot in front of us, that we should all be conscious that ultimately, even though we might have different perspectives, that we're living in the same community and trying to get through and improve it day by day. None of us are perfect, that's for darn sure, especially myself, but I am very humbled to be able to serve with each of you. I didn't intend on taking the whole 4 minutes, but I thank you. Wish you all the best support as you go ahead in the millage in November also. Long and short of it, for us, we're not going to be asking for any more money than we did the year before, but we need some help. So, and thank you again.
Thank you.
All right.
Any others?
That's it.
All right, now we're into the consent agenda. Any questions, comments regarding the work session minutes for August 9th, regular meeting August 12th, special meeting August 13th, and a work session on August 14th?
The regular meeting, I noticed today that the roll call was incomplete. It had been just cut off, so I corrected it. Everyone that was there has been now added. It reads Mr. Byer, Mr. Gasky, Ms. McGuire, Mr. Nordine, Mr. Palmer, and Mr. Weed.
Any comments regarding payment of bills for $150,369.51? Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So move.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Ms. McGuire. Roll call.
Mr. Gasky. Ms. McGuire.
Yes.
Mr. Cummings.
Yes.
Mr. Byer.
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Palmer.
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Subcommittee and project updates.
All right, so after the last board meeting, on the 12th, there was a special board meeting held on August 13th concerning the road millage, and it was approved, the ballot language was approved, associated with the November 5th election for 2019. And so everything was filed with the clerk by 3:59 that day on the 13th. Was the deadline was made, and we've already received the ballot proofs as far as the November 5th election. For number 2, engineering updates, I'll ask Mr. Freeman to come up. He provided a report on the different projects.
Good evening. Some of these are later on in the agenda, so I'll briefly touch base on them, but then I can address any questions later on. Phase 1 water main assistance. Essentially, we are complete out there with all of the repairs from Phase 1, along with we're in the process now of actually making the hookups to the existing homes from the meter pits. I think the last count was we're up in the 10, somewhere between 10 and 15 that are complete of the 24. And right now it's just a matter of the plumber scheduling with the individual property owners and getting that taken care of. Hopefully by the second week of September, those connections will be complete, and then they'll go on to restoration of the individual lots, which will take place later in probably October when the weather is more cooperative as far as restoration and seed taking before winter sets in, which isn't too far away. So, any questions on Phase 1 status? Like I said, we have pay requests later on. So, Old Orchard Campground electrical upgrades. We've worked with the electrical engineer. I've sat down with Al and Gary to go over that. We're getting the manufacturer's cut sheets for the different pieces of equipment that they need to go out to the local suppliers and contractors to get a price. I think based on where we're at now, we're back within a reasonable project budget. Once they get their prices from the suppliers and the contractor and talk to Consumers Energy, we'll have a better figure as far as that goes. Looking at the special assessment district that we did, we've provided an estimate for the engineering and cost to set that up. over in the Elk Lane, Lake Street area. Roughly, again, it depends on how far we want to carry the sewer. Somewhere's around 3,500 feet of sewer over there to service that neighborhood. That could vary a little bit depending on how that all shakes out. In the ordinance and stuff, your existing ordinance, you do have provisions that private property can and should connect to a public sewer through public right-of-way or whatever if it's within 400 feet of that public sewer. If it exceeds that 400 feet, either on-site sewage disposal or sewage treatment needs to take place in the forms of a septic system or a private sewer crossing one ownership of property out to the connection with the township sewer. Township's responsibility is where that sewer service lead or whatever connects to the public sewer within the public right-of-way. Everything on the other side of that is privately owned, private responsibility for maintenance. Pump Station 25, that comes up later on. We've worked with F&V on that as far as resolving the issues at Pump Station 25, combination of like I said, the what's coming up later in the meeting, along with the float control, elevation control in the station, so that pump or those pumps don't cycle as often as they have in the past. And we're looking at how far we can store sewage in that pump station before those pumps kick on. So that's part of the recommendation or the discussion that's coming later. Rinse stations at Ratliff Park, we have gotten a revised shower apparatus for that. And WTA is looking at the cost of that. We're looking at roughly, with the site improvements in that, around the $15,000 to $18,000 figure with, like I said, the site improvements, but that's still open for discussion as far as where to go next with that. So, but that is the full height shower rinse station available for the swimmers there. The dock erosion at Old Orchard Park, again, we've met with Gary and Al on that. We're getting some more information along the bank there to determine how much of a steel sheet pile wall or whatever that would be required there, along with they've got some drainage issues in the area. We're taking a look at that, and we're gathering those numbers, and we'll share those with Mr. Schaefer here shortly to decide how far we go with that project, helping those gentlemen out there. Wordsmith base valuation, that's ongoing on an as-needed basis as those come up. The SAW program data, I think I reported last month, that was actually the data that was gathered. Part of that was very helpful in working with Pump Station 25. So Townships has seen some value as far as coming out of that program. And then there's ongoing site plan reviews. I was just forwarded one for the new healthcare facility today by F&V Operations, so that's moving forward. So that's kind of all the as-needed projects that we're being involved in. Actual projects up to date, the stormwater and water system ordinances, we had a good work session back on the 9th. Got finally I think a good group of comments back in as far as how to finish up those. I know the payment policy group got back with me on what they want to see on the payment policy. So we're working towards the end of that and shooting for no later than September 13th date as far as getting all those comments included.
Wastewater or storm sewer?
Both. No, this is the sanitary sewer. Storm sewer, I didn't touch base on that since that was taken care of a while ago. But this is sanitary sewer and water system ordinances. So we got all of I think we've been informed of kind of some of the existing situations that are going out there in the township, and we're going to try to encapsulate those in your ordinance language to prevent some of those things from happening in the future, and to also grandfather some of those in. We talked last month on the water funding assistance. That's ongoing. We're continuing to monitor any grant programs that are coming up. Federal government will be coming up with anything new, obviously after October 1st. Currently, USDA RD doesn't know of any ECWAG program or whatever coming out, but they'll know more as the fiscal year ends and the new fiscal year starts up. Water main, phase 2 water main, again, we'll talk about that a little bit later in the meeting, but as we are today, where the project is, we have USDA RD approval to move forward with advertising and bidding once we discuss the budget and the funding issues that we got to take care of. I dropped off with Mr. Schaefer the executed engineering agreement. So they're all happy with the fact that you have a program in place that once this goes to construction, you've got the oversight and all that in place to build the project. Phase 3 trail project is wrapping up. We're essentially done. We're waiting for the archaeological group to come back with their full report. They apparently had identified maybe one area of concern, but they really didn't allude to what that concern was. And with that being wrapped up, that'll essentially be at a point where then you can, once you secure funding for the actual construction, then you'll be able to move forward with finalizing that bid package and getting that out the door. But that will complete those obligations. And then the township facilities, we have a work session on Wednesday to go over the the initial input that we got from the various departments and staff, and the community center, the senior center, the library, and then we've also now since then went through a couple of iterations to work on those numbers and the space requirements and all of that. So we'll be able to present that Wednesday night. So, but. That's my report. Any questions?
Yes, right. So
yes.
Rewinding back to the electrical improvements at
Yes.
Old Orchard, did you say that was going to come up later, or was?
Well, what we basically we're gonna get the information for Al and Gary to take like the panel box spec,
Right.
the wire spec, the pedestal specs to the suppliers and that to get an actual quote on that. And then since they're going to install a majority of that of material themselves, that saves a lot of the labor costs.
Sure.
And that was where some of the budget information, the estimate that we had was kind of out of whack. We provided costs for a contractor to come in and do all of that. So, so a combination of all that, then we'll have better numbers to share with Mr. Schaefer as far as that goes, as far as where that project would be coming in at.
Is the
We're
scope of,
thinking it's going to be around the $70,000 range. I think Al had previously, it was like 45,000 a couple of
47.
years ago. So one of the key things there is that the transformer that Consumers Energy had installed, because that's having other components hooked to it, we actually have to bring in a separate now transformer for just these pedestals. We can't, there's too much pull off from that transformer to also add on these 50 amp pedestals.
and is that because of the size of the units we have coming into the park? I mean, it's
Yes.
larger
Yes.
RVs and all that.
If you want to consider them RVs, then so.
Whatever we want to call it. Fair enough. Okay, good.
Yes.
That's right.
So
Mobile homes.
he even said there were some I guess one lady out there was actually charging her golf cart. So they have quite a lot of demand on those sites, so that's why they want to get up to these 50 amp services. So
And just, I mean, because there will be continual growth down there, as you know, there's obviously planned for headroom, additional.
continued expansion, yes. That's
That's
built into these components. So
That's great. Thank you.
Rick, is this the west end, east end, or where? Where are they concentrating this update?
this is on the west end, I
West
believe.
end?
I think that's, yeah, it's when you come in the entrance there, it's to the left.
Yeah, west end.
Yeah, So there's 36 units, or 36 sites down there that they're looking at improving that to 50 amp.
Rick, back to phase one. How many, are there any homeowners that haven't hooked up or don't want to hook up to municipal water?
We had one at the end of Forest, and I can't think of the name right now. They chose not to hook up. Everybody else has, and I think we actually added one additional one. So our number of 24 stayed the same, because that was what we originally had thought, including that one at the end of Forest. So we've got all of them hooked. Basically everybody that was out there except for that one has signed up for it.
Thank you.
Could you give the board a little bit of understanding about the amount of water main that had to be fixed?
Yes, at the end of at the end of Van Etten Dam Road towards the lake, we ended up having to repair or lower 125, 135 feet of water main. We originally had thought through the investigation that was done with F&V and that at the end of it, there was only going to be about 60 feet. But what they did is they started at the end and they kept taking part of what we did is everything that we uncovered, we re-verified the depths to back up what was originally was investigated. So that documentation is in the file. And basically we walked our way up that main and it ended up being that far up before we were at 66 inches below, or from the ground surface to the top of the main. So they lowered that, and then also because that amount of length, we had to repressurize, rechlorinate, and all of that end down there before we were able to make any of the hookups. So, and that also disturbed more of the road and all that. But we got that all taken care of. Everything is now within the original specs. All the curb stop boxes, hydrants, and main are within what was originally proposed in phase one.
Awesome.
So,
How did that happen?
not having been on site, I can't say for sure, but it appears from what John Henry investigated is that section was either at or below the groundwater table.
Mm-hmm.
So in that original construction, the contractor or whatever did not want to or did not dewater so that he could dig deeper to put the main in. Part of John Henry's activity was they dewatered the site completely so that they could go essentially as deep as we needed to go. So that appears to be the reason. The only thing that's out there that's in the way that would have caused but that should have been brought to the township's attention as far as that was a decision for you through F&V to make and not the contractor. So.
And that's what accounted for the additional cost.
Correct.
That we
Yes.
incurred.
Yeah. The $3,000 plus that's over is basically that extra cost for lowering that water main, and then obviously, like I said, the road restoration that went along with it and that.
And one other item, you mentioned about the assessment district in the Oak Lane area.
Yes.
Did you come up with an amount for that?
Yes.
3,500.
Yes. Let me get to my. 635,000, almost 636,000 for the sewer, and that's somewhere between 30 and 35 parcels, based on what was provided by the assessor's office and looking at that out there. That's 561,400 for the actual construction costs, and about 75,000 to create the SAD and the engineering that goes along with it.
Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so to recap the community branding event, that was Tuesday the 13th at the Warrior Pavilion, 6 p.m. I counted 38 people there. We were out of there a little after 7 o'clock, and the community was able to hear from both Ben Muldrow, the branding specialist, as well as Joe Borgstrom was back in the community. They spent Monday afternoon, all day Tuesday, and Wednesday morning in the community, meeting with targeted customer focus groups as well as facilitating that community branding event. Up on the township's website is a recap of the initial thoughts, and that's posted on our website on the main page, right at the right where you get on the home page, and you can watch that, understand their initial thoughts, and we're going to be trying to schedule something to get them back into the community after they're able to pull some data together. The assessor, she was also able to pull some information for them as far as the within our BS&A accounting software, as well as the assessment software from the zip codes, and really get some data behind where people are coming to be able to have their second and third home here. So much more information to come on that. We also had a 2020 budget work session number 3. That was on the 13th at 1:30 here in the library. And we have the 2020 budget work session number 4 scheduled for the 11th of September. It's a Wednesday here at the library at 1:30. The Township Board work session that Mr. Freeman mentioned is Wednesday, the 28th at the Warrior Pavilion at 6 o'clock, and that's associated with the decision-making process and the preliminary concept of a consolidated municipal services center. It is a board work session, and the public is invited to attend and come hear the current facts and the status of the information. The on that would be last Monday was the 19th of August, and Supervisor Weed and I attended the Oscoda Township Board meeting. There, the board discussed the construction of an independent sewer lagoon system in the industrial park there in Oscoda Township. That would be a separation from the current Oscoda Township system, as well as a sewer expansion project down the US 23, and it is to the address of 3008, which is right around the Camp Inn. I wanted to give everybody a reminder. 2 months ago, the Township Board approved a list to be auctioned at the Oscoda Wurtsmith Airport Authority public auction sale this Saturday, the 31st at 10 a.m. And that start time will be at 3961 East Airport Drive in Oscoda. And it's out on the base. There are numerous items. All the information is included in the packet, but they have tractors, trucks, backhoes, forklifts, and related equipment. There's a lot of good stuff going up. There is an SUV, there's an ATV, a couple ATVs, and approximately 90 bicycles that are going to be auctioned up, along with power tools and other various items. So it will be a live auction at 10 a.m. and so it should be a good sale.
Will there be an opportunity before the auction starts to find out what these items are?
Yeah, there's a list of items in the packet, and there is also a website with a link that shows all of that. If you Google the Oscoda Wurtsmith Airport Authority public auction, it'll come up with the auctioneer.
I believe I saw somewhere listed that the day before the auction, there's a time to Friday.
Good.
10 to 2.
10 to 2.
Thank you.
I want to bring up that on the 15th of August, there was a bike path public engagement meeting regarding Phase 3, which runs from the school out to Old Orchard Park, which means it runs through Foot Site area. The public All the public was welcome to come to that meeting, and the Foot Site residents were specifically invited to that meeting. However, none of those residents attended the meeting, but there were two who lived along the Phase 1 portion of the bike path who attended. They had a few questions, but just to make sure everyone was aware that we did have that public engagement.
How were the Foot Site people invited to that meeting?
Through mailings.
I've got one topic, if I could. What's the status of the research regarding the Elk Lane sewer? I know Mr. Freeman touched on the special assessment district portion of it, and we've heard talked about tonight. I'm just wondering what the status is and when we might know the results of, like, I believe the motion was all options and considering all of those.
So I just recently got some figures from Mr. Freeman. I have been dedicating some time to fulfilling a FOIA request associated with that, compiling all of that information. I did get the information from Mr. Freeman very late last week, and so I can use those figures that were provided to be able to come up with the different options.
Okay. So, do you envision sending an email report of some sort to the board, or like at a work session, or I'm wondering how we're going to go through digesting the information to make a...
Very similar to the supervisor's report that was, provided. I would envision putting that in a board
in
packet.
a board packet. Okay.
All right, on to the superintendent's report. Proposed repair of pump station number 25.
All right, so your packet contains a detailed memo from the F&V regional manager concerning the pump repair of pump station number 25. This is in the township's wastewater system. The memo details the coordinated efforts between F&V and ROW to identify the issues and provide solutions for the township board to consider. The quote detailing the work to be performed and the pump sizing and analysis are also contained in the packet. Based on the cost of the repair of $16,330 versus the replacement of $33,726, F&V recommends the repair of pump station number 25. No matter what, either option, it's going to cost $2,500 to get at the lifts or at the pump station, so that $2,500 installation cost is the same for both options, bringing the total repair cost up to $18,830, and that's to be paid out of the sewer fund 591-000-930.000 for repairs and maintenance.
Any comments?
These parts in stock at the suppliers for the pump station, for the pumps?
Yes, they're ready to go.
So we'll have this and be done in a week or less?
I don't know in a week or less, no. I don't have a specific time period, but they're waiting for a decision to be able to go. They know we've been working at this.
All right.
Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the cost of $18,830 for repair of wastewater pump station number 25.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Byer. Roll call?
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Request for 2018 Round 4 of the Iron Bell Trail Challenge Grant reimbursement.
All right, so this request goes back to 2018, and this was a joint effort in 2018 for the Iron Bell Trail grants, and $30,000 was from Plainfield Township, $25,000 from Oscoda Township, and $30,000 from Oscoda Township. So the township previously paid $15,890 to Spicer in 2018, and the remaining $14,110 is still owed to Spicer. So your packet contains the DNR's request for grant reimbursement. The township would pay Spicer the remaining $14,110 to be paid out of General Fund Parks and Recreation, and the There's a specific line item in there for the Grant Iron Bell. We would then submit the form, and it has a deadline of the middle of September to submit that and provide supporting documentation to the DNR. And on average, the DNR takes approximately 4 to 6 weeks to process the grant reimbursement.
Comments?
So they would reimburse the whole 30,000?
Yeah, so we paid and got reimbursed for $15,890 last year, and then this is the second half, basically, of that.
Is there comments or a motion?
I move that we approve the $14,110 to be paid to Spicer, and move ahead as we can with the reimbursement procedure.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Byer, support from Ms. McGuire. Roll call?
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Request to increase 2019 appropriations.
All right, so based on the previous action item, requesting the board to approve an increase to the 2019 General Fund Parks and Rec appropriations for line 101-751-880.572, Grant Iron Bell, from $197,000 up to $211,110 to accommodate the $14,110 payment to Spicer that will be reimbursed by the DNR through 2018 Round 4 IBT Challenge Grant previously discussed. This would increase 2019 total general fund appropriations from $3,229,988 up to $3,244,098.
Comments? Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the increase of appropriations of $14,110 to the 2019 General Fund Parks and Rec, bring the 2019 total appropriations to $3,244,098.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Ms. McGuire. Roll call.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Police Department request for 6 new radar units.
All right, so your packet contains a $13,560 quote from Pulse Technology Partners detailing the cost for 6 new radar units, mounts, and shipping to be paid out of the Police Fund 207-000-980.000 equipment line. This request was submitted by the police chief due to the current radar units in the police cruisers have lasted well past their useful life expectancy. The radar units being requested can be installed in-house by the township.
Comments?
For a little more detailed clarification, kind of regarding Mr. Miller's public comment earlier, it's my understanding these units aren't able to perform the job anymore accurately enough to be relied upon when needed. Is that correct understanding?
Correct.
So they turn on, they work, they function, but they aren't functional. They're not broken, but they don't work.
Correct.
All right.
Did these come from the base when they closed?
These are
Ancient.
very old radar units.
1990s.
Yeah.
Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve the police chief's recommendation to purchase the 6 new radar units at a total cost of $13,560.
Support.
Motion by Ms. McGuire, support by Mr. Cummings. Roll call.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Police Department request for equipment upgrade in the interview room.
Right. This packet contains a $5,570 quote from WatchGuard detailing the cost to upgrade equipment in the interview room within the Township's police station. To be paid from the Police Fund 207-000-980.000 equipment line. This includes a new camera system, microphone, DVR, hard drive, thumb drive, desktop stand, wireless kit, and shipping. The request was submitted by the police chief due to the current age of the interview room equipment. There will not be additional charges for installation of this equipment.
Comments?
In your action line item, it doesn't specify the price. Is there a reason for that?
It should be that exact quote,
Okay.
the $5,570.
Okay, thank you.
I move that we approve the police chief's request to upgrade the camera equipment in the interview room for $5,570.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Cummings, support by Mr. Gajewski. Roll call?
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed.
Can I make a comment as well?
Yes.
To reiterate something we talked about Friday, trying to work these things into the capital improvement plan so that the police officers know what the board intends to replace in the near future, that the board knows, that the public knows what kind of investments the board intends to make in the near future for equipment, especially relating to the police department. Just wanted to share for all board members and the public that we discussed that Friday morning.
The plan, the capital improvement plan for next year includes the portable radios. Each one of those portable radios for the officers is upwards of $3,000. So those are some of the things that you'll be seeing built into the 2020 appropriations.
Request for increased 2019 appropriations.
All right. Based on the previous two action items, I'm requesting the board to approve an increase to the 2019 police fund appropriations $1,308,607 up to $1,327,737 to accommodate the $19,130 in proposed equipment purchases detailed for the radar units and the interview room upgrades.
Comments? Is there a motion?
Yeah, I'll move that we approve the increase of $19,130 to the 2019 police fund appropriations.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Cummings, support by Ms. McGuire. Roll call?
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Economic Improvement Director position.
Okay, so the Economic Improvement Committee has been working to develop the Economic Improvement Director position contained within your packet. The board will notice that the Economic Improvement Director position is proposed as an independent contractor position aligned to implement Resolution 2019-20 and the creation of the Economic Improvement Committee. Resolution 2019-20 was largely based on the Township Board's prior approval of the Place Leap proposal to create the Township's economic development strategy, downtown redevelopment strategy, community branding and marketing strategy, as well as a communication strategy. Place Leap consultants were in the community last week and engaged both the targeted stakeholder groups as well as facilitating the community branding event last Tuesday, the 13th, at the Warrior Pavilion. As these strategies are being developed, the Township Board needs to consider approving the Economic Improvement Director position to help the Economic Improvement Committee drive positive economic improvements in our community through the implementation of these strategies. Your packet also contains supporting documentation providing the Economic Improvement Committee to support the recommended annual contract amount ranging from $75,000 to $95,000 depending on qualifications. As the Township Board is preparing to hold the fourth 2020 budget work session, and this annual contract will largely be the the largest expense associated with the Economic Improvement Committee moving forward, the IEC has made a recommendation of the Township Board to consider approving the Economic Improvement Director position. You will also see in there their supporting documentation. The chair of the Economic Improvement Committee, he was able to provide the pay scale figures as far as what some of the national data associated with these positions would pay. I also included several of the positions that were posted on the MEDA, or the Michigan Economic Development Association, as well as the international agency that credentials economic improvement professionals. So when you see in there, as far as a director position, the proposed range is largely based on that information. So to be able to approve that position, that requires Township Board approval, as well as the plan to move forward as far as posting that position. I detail the hiring process, the proposed hiring process associated with that. The Township Board would be represented with Trustee Gajewski as far as being able to serve on the committee, go through the interview process. Ultimately, the recommendation would come back to the Township Board for approval.
Comments?
Yeah, I have one. So in the recommendations for the salary, is this, just to be clear, is it understood by the people who are recommending the salary range that this position would be contract, not employee?
Yes. So as far as retirement, healthcare benefits, and the payroll taxes, that would be the responsibility of that contractor.
So effectively less than, certainly taken off the top and would diminish their take-home, right? Which would also include healthcare. Right. Okay. So that's not very much then. I mean, I know it sounds like a lot of money, but for a contract position, that's not a particularly high range. How does this number fit when you said it's being positioned in a national picture here? I mean, really? I mean, where is that in the range of the national scene for somebody of this caliber?
And so what you'll see within that payscale.com, the payscale.com shows, say, an annual salary, all right? And that annual salary for somebody with 6 to 9 years experience, we're not looking for somebody fresh out of college to be able to do this. That annual salary would be around $65,000 is what payscale.com says. And then I provided different examples of various positions as far as, salaries that were recently posted.
Okay.
Dave, the two groups that you are suggesting that we should list this opportunity on, are they going to reach the same people or different people?
So the MEDA is the Michigan organization, whereas the IEDC, or the International Economic Development Council, that would be more of a broader net to cast out for potential candidates.
I think the nationwide aspect would be worth it. I don't know about international, but
yeah.
But if you go nationwide with this announcement, I can see that.
It did, and in my previous capacity as finance director, our economic improvement director, the city of Brooklyn, he was credentialed through the IEDC. So, and he was Florida and Ohio and Indiana, served in economic improvement committee capacity or as a director position in various states.
Well, one suggestion I would like to make to this proposal is I would like to raise the upper end of that cap to $140,000 to give the committee the flexibility if if they're able to find the right person for that position. And as Mr. Cummings pointed out, this is a contract person or firm where we're not paying any benefits to this person. All that's on them. And I related a story at our Friday meeting where a number of years ago I saw a 60 Minutes piece where a town in Texas was devastated with a number of their major employers had closed or pulled out of that community, and they were in a difficult position, and they were actually looking for to hire a similar person, and they put a range of I think 125 or 150, and somebody that was on that committee knew of a fella in another state that had been very successful in economic development, and he approached him and asked him to submit a resume and interview, and the fella came to the interview, but he said, I would require $250,000 salary and a 4-year contract. And in that 4 years, so the town paid roughly $1 million. He brought in over $1 billion of revenue to that community. In my opinion, that was a pretty good investment on their part. Now, they took a bit of a risk there, but in order to get the right person, you have to have the money offered to bring in the right people for these jobs. And I think giving the committee the upper limits on that pay scale, if they're able to find the right person, would be worth the investment.
So we've discussed this at work sessions and whatnot, and probably has come through my hesitancy or my indecision on this topic for various reasons. But one of them being the cost, and I wouldn't want to open the upper, the upper end for the fact that we could spend $140,000. I just don't. I think that would be too much. I understand the concept of trying to see what we could get, see what we could attract, and then make that decision. But I feel like if we make available $140,000, we're going to end up spending it, and I wouldn't want to spend that much money.
Where are we planning to pay this person from? Where is this money coming from?
Fund 236.
So any of the base reuse money, that's where that's going to come out of.
So right now, the township needs to be able to invest resources into current retention of our industrial park, our industrial partners, as well as being able to focus on expansion efforts for our industrial partners and be able to attract new business. And right now, we do not have anyone tasked with that role as far as retention, expansion of current business, as well as the attraction of new business to that industrial setting.
So we already have a housing issue for the people for Coletta that's here. So attracting more people to the area that there's no housing for, is this person going to be able to help with the housing crisis as well?
And that was loud and clear as far as the economic development strategy, the downtown redevelopment strategy, and the community branding and marketing. Those, both Joe Borgstrom and Ben Muldrow, they spoke in that presentation on some of those challenges and how that's going to be incorporated into those strategies.
For this person to work on.
And those strategies are going to be the basis as far as the implementation of those strategies. That's what's outlined in the position.
So this position would answer to the committee before, or would that person be overseen by yourself?
So this position would be a contracted employee, and there are different limitations as far as what the IRS would consider an employee versus a contracted position. And so the deliverables associated with the contract would be in the strategies. And so they would be reporting to the Economic Improvement Committee, as well as I would be reporting on the progress of those strategies.
will this person have dedicated office space somewhere that we could direct them to? Or would it be just like email or phone calls or that type of it?
And so during this process, we have to really understand that work schedule. Obviously, the best use of that person's time isn't sitting in Township Hall. It's out with the employers, right? Interviewing, trying to understand those challenges, potentially working with the MEDC and the EDA to be able to attract those or expand and retain those businesses. I wouldn't imagine dedicated work hours where they have office hours, say from 10 to 2, Monday through Friday. It would be flexible. There would obviously be travel involved as well. I would be able to help facilitate within the township, be able to coordinate with Supervisor Weed as far as hoteling that space in the supervisor's office, or even with code compliance after 1 o'clock to be able to hotel out of there.
In order for us to accomplish the job, as we've seen on some of the comments that came in regarding the petitions for the Township Hall, a few in there were stop spending our money and not doing anything. In order for us to make progress, we have to have the right people in the right places. In order to have the right people, you have to attract them. So I agree the salary range that we saw in our documentation is too low, and I would definitely agree with increasing that top end range so that we can attract them. If we go in at a low range right off the bat, you're automatically going to cut out the people who could fill in a higher range because they're just not even going to look at it.
I think it's risky to respond to community input of quit spending our money and not doing anything with spending more money.
I don't think that's the addressing response, though, is it? I mean, because we're not doing nothing, we're actually doing something considerably aggressive.
That's why I said it's risky. I didn't say it's wrong, but risky.
Okay.
Two routes: either accomplish more or spend less. So that's the two routes I see to fixing that, addressing that community concern.
I think it'd be a phenomenal success story if it was to be as extreme as the one that Bill mentioned, where you go obviously into the stratosphere of a salary,
Certainly
and
agree.
then you turn around and you bring in $1 billion of product. But yeah, I mean, the only thing you have to control that with, I mean, if you go in there from the viewpoint of just a limited salary to begin with, then you've definitely limited your candidate pool. But if you go in there from the viewpoint of these are the people who are going to be managing the individual, and that's the committee, and then you've got reports from Schaefer as well, we're not out of control. I mean, I'm not saying that we open up the checkbook. I'm just saying I can see the problem. As somebody who's been in contracting for decades, I can tell you that the cost of being on the other end of this number is not, like $95,000 sounds like a lot of money, but you're not taking a lot of that home.
I understand.
You're paying, health care out of that. You're paying all your other, you just have a payroll just alone. I mean, the fact that you have to yourself pay the state and federal, the employer and the employee portions of that, you're just not getting a lot left over. So, it's one of the overheads of being a contractor, which everybody who is a contractor accepts. And it's one of the reasons why someone as an employer like the township, it's easier for us because we don't have to deal with that. They are truly separate, and though there would be a contract, it's severable as opposed to being an employee. So I think there's definitely a cost benefit right there alone. You don't want to be in a situation where you've got an ultra high salary and they're an employee.
I agree.
Frankly, it's a lot harder to get rid of them if you don't like them. So just a consideration. I mean, it's a little bit of put it? It's, you're paying for the risk management. I think that's sort of baked into the salary in that case.
And to clarify, what I've observed with the township operations for decades is that it's cheaped out so much that some money has been spent and not much product has come out of it. I would rather spend more on attracting the right person and actually having a solid output from that work.
Dave, can you tell me what the fund balance is in 236?
In 236, right now it's over $3 million.
So if we raise it to $140,000, how many years is that going to be before that money's gone?
Over 20.
Quite frankly, I don't see this being a position that would be in existence for an extremely long period of time. When you're talking about a contract person or a company, you bring them in for economic development. I would think that within 5 or 6 years, you should see that economic development occurring, and you really wouldn't be in need of their services much after that, in my opinion. Now, they may have some other points to consider that, they've been talking to other companies and have other ventures that they're looking into, so you might continue with that. But I don't see this being a 20 or 30-year program to hire for a long period of time.
I would hope so. I would agree, Bill. And in fact, I would say that probably half that time of that 6 years you mentioned, we would see product before the 6 years, long before that. I mean, I wouldn't want to
Certainly
get
hope
into
so.
a long-term
I
contract.
would hope so.
And I didn't see anything in the proposal in terms of the time frame for a contract. Was that something to be determined yet, or?
So would be on an annual basis. Now, if you walk through this process and we post tomorrow, okay, we're getting applicants for a month, say, that's the end of September. Interviews in early October. Likely somebody would maybe have to leave a current position and transition here. And so that could take, typically longer than maybe a 2 weeks notice, to be able to get them into place, hopefully, between Thanksgiving and Christmas of 2019. And that's an aggressive timetable.
And their contract would be reviewed annually.
Correct.
I'd like to make a comment that applies to what John said and Bill. I've heard Bill's story now twice regarding the gentleman that demanded $250,000 and a 4-year contract, and the city or whatever the entity was agreed to that, and the story ends really good. He generated how many?
Almost $1 billion.
Almost $1 billion. But what the story implies is that the deciding board had a choice. You've indicated that they were offering a top end much lower than $250,000, but they were able to look over the situation and adjust and adapt to what he was asking. We could do that too without going to $140,000. I think I agree with John. If you offer 140, then you're going to spend 140. But I do think that, we're close to 100,000, 95, and it's like if you're a salesman and you're trying to sell something, a house or a car, you go, $99.99. You try to stay away from the higher number, but I think if we get 100,000 or 110, 105, that would get us over, that would get us into the, the 6-figure realm without going to 140. I guess that's my point. get us over the 100,000, but not as high as 140. And we can do like in a Bill's story, and if somebody really dynamic comes along but wants more money, then let's say we set it at 105,000, we can adjust to that, just like the town did in your story. We're not locked in to that, so.
I think the difference in that story is somebody that was on the selection committee knew of this fella and convinced him to apply even though it didn't meet his terms, and he came and, it was a 60 minutes piece, so it was a little out of the ordinary to be on 60 minutes. But I think the idea is if we're advertising this, you have to put the higher value out to attract the right people. If you don't have it at a sufficient level, you're just going to get people that they're going to overlook it and go on to the next one because we haven't even given the possibility in the advertisement of the bid that higher level is available. And I think, the old phrase, you get what you pay for, I think that isn't any more true than in this situation. And, like we've said before, being a contract employee, you're looking at a $100,000 contract where you're not paying any retirement benefits, you're not paying any medical, dental, vision, vacation time, retirement, any of those things. Now you're talking about a salary that would be $50,000 to $60,000. That's just not going to attract the right person for this job. This is not an easy position to fill, I believe. So.
I think if we set it too low, we're jumping over quarters to save dimes. I would think the first contract would need to be a 4-year term because I don't think we're going to see, significant results within the first year. There's a lot of gearing up during that time. And then just have it go on an annual basis after that, depending on how those first 4 years have gone. And then, of course, there's always the standard out clauses within the contract.
I think 4 years is too long. I think 3 years would be long enough. You should be able to see some progress. And then annual after that.
I'm okay with the 4 years. But, all of this is a risk because having been on the airport board here in somewhat recent years, the airport put a bunch of money into a company that was going to generate business for wide-bodied airplanes here. I don't have the figure, but I don't think they got anything out of it. Didn't pan out at all. And the guy making the presentations and so forth was very convincing and I think he was sincere. I'm trying to avoid the word very slick because that wouldn't fit. He was genuine, but they didn't get anything out of it that I can recall. And a lot of money was spent. So it doesn't always work, but I'm not trying to end the thing. It's worth a risk. It's worth trying. But there are cases where you don't get much.
So one of the things leading to my hesitancy that when we ultimately get there, if we do, is the contract. Seeing what the contract looks like, what it requires, what kind of like milestones or benchmarks or requirements we're asking of this contracted person might completely ease my mind, and I might think, we have built-in assurances. They might not. So that's part of the stuff leading to my hesitancy, and we'll figure that out if and when we get there. But part of that is, we were talking about an annual contract coming into tonight, and now we're talking about a 4-year contract. We were talking about $95,000 a year annually contract, and now we're talking about maybe $140 for 4. These are things that are starting to raise my level of uncomfort. Do we know what the industry standard is for these kind of things? Is it an annual contract? Or is 4 years standard?
Well, I think you can go back to my scenario as far as the board on my contract had a out clause, and after 6 months, if I wasn't gonna cut it, it'd send me packing back to Ohio. And I, since, have had a 3-year term. Nancy, who, at the previous meeting for Northern Assessing, who was a contractor, there were, that was a 4-year term with 2, so it started January 1st of 2018 to the end of 2019 for 2 years, and then to go, we had the option to go another 2 years or 4 years with that.
Is there a reason behind the original proposal of yearly contracts?
So the contract's going to have out clauses, if you will. Those are baked into a standard professional services agreement that, goes in front of the board. So as far as the duration, there's options to be able to evaluate that, much like, Nancy or other contractors we have, and consider to extend those options or cut ties, or in Nancy's case, there was an option to propose to go out to bid.
Sure. Again, I just reiterate, I mean, we've been talking about this for a couple weeks to months, and now in the last 20 minutes, things have changed a lot, and this just trying to keep up with it and understand.
Any other comments? I make a motion that we consider approving that we approve the Economic Improvement Director position as presented under a pay scale of $85,000 to $125,000 a year at a 3-year contract.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Weed, support by Mr. Palmer.
Can I ask you to repeat the terms? It's 85 to 125.
3-year contract.
3-year contract. And, okay, that's it. Thank you.
Roll call?
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
I stick to my suggestion that we get just over the 100,000, 105 something. I think 125 is too high. No.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, no. Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Partial payment to John Henry Excavating.
Your packet contains an email from Rick Freeman with Rowe providing an update on the progress made for Phase 1 of the water main extension. The first component that will be presented to the board for consideration deals with bringing Phase 1 of the water main extension up to construction specifications. John Henry has detailed the $33,950 in work completed to date on the invoice. Based on the second partial payment to MacArthur Construction approved by the Township Board on the 22nd of April meeting this year, the Township held back $30,000 to be used towards bringing Phase 1 of the water main extension in line with construction specifications. Rowe is working with John Henry to better understand the costs associated with chlorinating the roadway. I did get an update that would be $500 associated with chlorinating the roadway after it was disturbed due to the water main.
Comments?
Well, I just have to say that I was a little disappointed when the amount turned out to be this much, because originally it was provided it would only be around 24,000, and we put it at 30. It's what we withheld from the other contractor. But I understand it's difficult to know what's underground without first digging it up to see what's there. And to spend the extra money to make sure the project is done correctly and it meets all the specifications that were required. And the other thing is, I think we're very should be thankful to have a contractor like John Henry that does this work for us, who time and time again does an exceptional job here for the township. We have emergency calls. He shows up, the next day with his equipment and gets the job done and gets it done right. So I would like to make a motion to approve the partial payment of $33,950 to John Henry Excavating for bringing the Phase 1 water main extension in line with construction specifications.
Support.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
For the 119,000, will seek reimbursement from the grant money still for that amount? Or are we going to be taking that out of the general fund?
So.
Or not out of the general fund, but out of the water fund?
So 33,950 is the work for Phase 1 associated with MacArthur. This would then be approved by Troy Schenck. So this would have to be approved by the USDA to be able to move forward.
So then they would, okay.
Very similar to the MacArthur payments.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other comments?
What is, probably a dumb question, what does chlorinating the road mean, and why is it necessary?
So the main actually ran down Van Etten Dam Road, and so it was disturbed digging it up.
Yep.
And so this is a way to, it's what we do for dust control.
That's just about the same.
And to clarify that, through the township and the road commission twice a year, I believe, chlorides the roads throughout the county, including Oscoda's. The actual, like the last.
Mr. Freeman, could you step to the podium because we're not catching it for the audience? Thank you.
Clarification on that is, for the township, through the county road commission, they chloride the roads. I believe their schedule's twice a year. What we actually found out is the last about 300 feet of Van Etten Dam Road is actually not county jurisdiction.
Okay.
So this last 300 feet is the $500 that he would come in and chlorinate. Now that we've got limestone in there and the activity coming in and out, that was what the recommendation, or what he thought would take care of it, above and beyond what the county will do from up to that point. So.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
So if the chlorination were included, as proposed, it would be $34,450.
And we have businesses down at the end of that road, right? Resort businesses. So having a road that isn't a massive dust all the time is a big plus, so.
To the residents.
Yeah.
All right, roll call.
Is the number that we
We'll change that
struck the
number, Bill.
motion on, does it need to be updated before we vote? Because I heard the 33,950 number for the motion.
You're looking for the 34,450?
Correct.
Okay. Mr. Palmer?
Oh, you want to add the 500 to that?
Yes.
I'll amend my motion to bring it up to that amount, the 34,000.
I still support it, Jim.
450.
All right, roll call.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Palmer.
Yes.
Ms. McGuire.
Yes.
Mr. Byer.
Yes.
Mr. Cummings.
Yes.
Mr. Gieske.
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. The partial payment to John Henry for the extension hookups.
All right, so in that same email from Mr. Freeman from Rowe, the second component that will be presented to the board for consideration deals with hooking residents up to the water main. John Henry has detailed the $119,000 $20 in work completed to date on the invoice, as well as the work that still needs to be completed, including cutting and capping the wells. They're trying to do that in bulk. Have the well drilling company come in and do that in bulk. The outstanding work is anticipated to be completed before Labor Day, and the restoration work will be completed by the end of October 2019 because it's very difficult to get grass to grow right now. So the restoration would be the grass seed and the hay at the end of October.
Can you elaborate on the process of cutting and capping the well? Will they be destroyed or filled or that type of thing so it can't be rehooked up?
Okay, the process we're in now, the meter pits are in, so the plumber is working with the residents to run the service lines from the meter pit into the well house or wherever the well is. And then what we'll do, the first step is they will disconnect the internal plumbing of the house from the well. Replace that now with the plumbing coming from the meter pit, so we've cut the well from the service, installed the water service line from the municipal system, and then what they will do is they will cap that plumbing and then also cap the well so that there won't be any chance of interconnection or contamination from the well into the municipal system. And part of the paperwork that we're working with each of the residents is to get that clear on the direction that they want as far as that well, and then that it is capped so that the township has that documentation on file.
So we don't require them to fill it or do anything like that?
If they want to keep it maintained for possibly irrigation or whatever, we're allowing them to do that. But if they do, or if they're okay with capping it, the well driller, and I can't think of the name of it. Webb, who does this, covers this area very well, he will actually grout the well closed if we are completely abandoning it.
Thank you.
Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the partial payment of $119,020 for Phase 1 water hookups.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Byer.
This payment will also work the same way?
For the hookups,
Yeah.
these are the MEDC funds associated with this. So this will be
Our first.
this will be our first payment out of the MEDC funds that we had to report a first quarter. This would be, we have to follow that grant agreement to be able to use the MEDC funds.
So we would request the money and then they would send it to us and then we would make the payment.
That is my understanding.
Thank you so much.
Any other comments? Roll call.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Phase 2 water main extension.
All right, Rick, don't go far. Your packet contains a detail from Rick providing an update on the funding for Phase 2 of the water main extension. The board needs to discuss options due to the projected funding shortfall, and those proposed funding options are detailed on the most recent memo from Rick last week.
As I mentioned earlier, the good news is that we have got all USDA approvals in place to move forward with the project. One of the last pieces of information that they require is based on the projected construction estimate that we generate. They also then obviously make sure that between the grants and all of that, that the funding is in place to cover the entire project. Unfortunately, as we've been monitoring the bidding climate that's out there, that we don't want to come in low with an estimate and then have the bids open and have a significant shortfall. So what we do is we try to capture as much information geographically as far as bids go, and then also statewide, also talking to the manufacturers of the pipe material and such. And two components, we're seeing, not totally across the board, but we are seeing anywhere from 35 to 50% above the engineer's estimates for bids coming in currently with the contractor climate that we have. And part of that is there's not as many contractors that are bidding the work. It is later in the year. So what we did is we conservatively looked at the estimate and that's where, from the water main standpoint, we're at an approximate shortfall, taking the water main all the way through Fallon Creek, as we originally had proposed, roughly an $800,000 shortfall based on the funding that's available and the estimate that we have as of today for the mainline water main. On top of that, obviously with the information now that we're getting through John Henry with the water service installations on phase 1, we also have 119 water services that are part of this project. There are quite a few more of these services that are greater than the 100 feet that we had on phase 1. So we've taken that into consideration. We have more extensive restoration of lawns and such on this project. So based on that, our estimate at the beginning was between $4,500 and $5,500 per water service. It's now coming in, based on the numbers we've got, at about $6,800, which gives us, with the total of available appropriations, which is also moving, obviously, because we're using some of that up on phase 1, we're roughly at about an $83,000 shortfall on the water services. Again, to take it all the way through Fallon Creek. We have a couple of options. Talking to you, well, one of the biggest things that was kind of hanging over our head was the deadline for the first grant, the $325,000. We have reached out to MEDC to ask for an extension. Have we officially gotten that extension yet?
We haven't officially gotten it, based on my conversation with the MEDC. It has to go through a formal process, but she did not communicate that this was going to be, she did not foresee humongous problems getting that approved.
Okay. So that's the one thing that's still holding over our head to, if they, for some reason, would not extend that deadline, which currently is for the 325, 12/31 of 2019. The other special appropriations is 12/31 of 2021. So what we're doing is we're asking, at least pushing that 325 deadline back to 12/20 or 12/31 of 2020, which will get us next construction season to adjust. So based on that being approved, the options that we would have moving forward would be talking to USDA. The township had started down a loan process a little shorter of a year ago. We pulled back on that when the special appropriations started coming in. We can dust that off and move that forward again. The way that they would recommend doing that would be to go ahead and bid the project as we have it right now, so then we would know exactly what the shortfall was on the main line, and then the township would apply for a loan to cover that gap. Now, if the bids come in favorably, could be a small number. If they come in like we've got it, it could be, like I said, $800,000. So, but they don't. If the township were to go that way, they don't recommend going out for a loan now, not knowing what that number is, and then having to adjust accordingly. Either you've asked for too much or you didn't ask for enough. So that's one option. The other option would obviously be rolling back the length of main that we complete on Loud Road or Loud Drive. And we looked at a couple of segments of there. If we brought back Loud Drive approximately 2,000 feet. That would basically reduce the mainline cost down to 1.3 million instead of 1.8. The revised water services, because that was also the north end of the project, is the larger services, the more extensive lawn restorations. That would bring the cost of those water services back to 678,000. Again, these are all approximate numbers. So we'd still have a potential project shortfall of about 236,000. Bringing it back another 775 feet would get us back within budget and give us about a 10% contingency that would be in your favor as far as depending on how the bids go. So that really is basically where we're at today. Like I said, USDA is ready, willing to work with us, and if we were to go forward with the bid and the township looking for a loan, they would take into consideration what your water fund balance is, depending on what that loan amount is. So that is one consideration that they would have. They would put a 120-day hold on the bids, so that the bids would come in. We would have about 120 days to close out or get the loan all in place and close that out. So again, realistically now, unless we shorten the project up, we're looking at a spring of 2020 startup. One other thing that we're doing is we've reached out to a couple of local contractors to see if our estimates are in line or out of whack, without them obviously committing to a number. And one of them is we're talking to John Henry to see if economy to scale or whatever, if he thinks that the numbers are high as far as what we've estimated to this point. So like I said, unfortunately that's where we're at, but it's better to be at this point bringing this up than having the bids opened yesterday and having a shortfall. So.
Comments?
What was the total fee that you would have to cut the project to cover this?
Roughly about 2,750 feet, somewhere in there. And basically, the way we've done that so far is we can cut, the way that the plans are laid out, we can cut sheet by sheet, and the estimate regenerates itself. So that's how we've come up with the numbers so far. But if that is the decision to cut the project back, then we look at all the miscellaneous factors. But that should give us enough cushion, like I said, to give us about a 10% contingency.
So the two options I'm hearing are cut back the number of services we can reach.
Cut back the length of main, which would obviously cut that cost along with the number of services.
Sure.
Correct.
Yes. Ultimately, I guess
Right.
I'm just trying to cut to the
Yes.
quick of it.
Right.
Cut back number of services we can reach in total, or don't accomplish it this year. So delay a year or cut back the number of services.
More than likely, whichever direction we go, except, well, if we shortened the project up, we could still get it out for bid this year and build it this year.
But we can't reach everyone.
We can't reach everything. And then what we would do is we would look for the rest of Loud and whatever, we would package that with a future project in our phasing plan.
Rick, is there data regarding Loud Drive about which part of Loud Drive, the north end or the south end, that is more in danger of the nasty stuff in the ground? That should be a big factor determining what we do.
The information that we've used to justify the ECWAG grant and all of that is that the Eagle now has their area of the plume identified. Loud is easily within that plume. Now they also have a variety of monitoring wells that they use to determine that. I don't know the exact locations of those monitoring wells in that area, but that is how they justified that map as far as identifying the plume in that area. And the entire stretch of Loud Drive through there is within that plume of either documented contamination of wells or the potential of contamination of wells.
You're talking about as far as Phelan Creek, the
Correct, yes.
the most extensive
Right.
part of what we're
Because
talking about.
that plume, from what I can understand from the past, is that's moving southeast and across Van Etten Lake, so.
Well, that, for my money, that ought to be a big part of what we decide to do or not to do.
And that was the justification for the various phases that we've come up with. You are correct.
In your first estimate, by taking 2,000 feet off, it reduces from 119 services to 100.
Right.
So there'll be 19 homes that wouldn't get serviced, and then you suggest another 775 feet. Do you know how many homes that would include in that?
I think it's another 15 or 16. As you come south, the properties get smaller and the density increases. So that could be another 20. It's, like I said, I don't have the exact number there, but no more than another 20 that would come off the. So if we brought that back, we would be taking about 40 homes off from the service lead.
In my, just my personal feeling, to me, that's not acceptable. We've been talking about this for a very long time. At one point, we were talking about going out for a loan if necessary to complete this project. If the grant funding didn't come through what we needed, I just can't go along with the idea of taking 40-some people off this project that we had been telling for a long time that they were going to be included. There's a lot of people on Up Loud Drive to the north that would like to be the next phase and get included in that. But to reduce this, that just doesn't work for me, to take 40-some people off the phase 2 plan that we've had in place for quite some time.
I completely agree. I could not agree more. The problem I have is I feel just as strongly about the fact that if we wait, then we have to tell all the people a whole year. We're not doing it until 2020. So I'm not negating your point. I completely agree with that. And my thoughts are we're faced with two potentially unacceptable options. I mean, this is tough for me. My thought would be, as a solution, is it possible to bid both options now? Because to me, we can't wait. We have to go ahead with bidding. Can we bid both options and see what's changed at that time? See what kind of bids we get back. Hopefully the problem doesn't exist. Hopefully, the estimates, it comes in lower than estimated. But then we can deal with bid option 1. We know what we need to go for a loan, or otherwise.
Yeah, I like that plan. I was
Right.
wondering about the same thing, because you're saying that we don't know what these bids are going to come in at.
Right, and with the loan process, you're right. You have the option of continuing on with that process or scaling the project back to within the limits that the funding commit. The other thing is we could get the favorable bids and be more in line with what we originally had thought. Again, it's just a very, very difficult market out there. Since the recession, the number of contractors that are out there are just not as many, and they seem to pick and choose which projects they want to sharpen their pencil on and not. And so it's very difficult to pinpoint the costs of these projects and material costs. 1 minute they're, and again, this is PVC water main, so it also is dictated by the price of oil. So if they're speculating oil to go up, then they start raising the price of plastic pipe.
Does going back to whatever other material, iron or something, is that
Ductile
more
iron?
cost? Yeah, ductile iron, is that more?
You do not want to know what the price of ductile iron is.
So at least it's steady.
So Your $1.8 million project would probably be close to $3 million.
Well, we're kind of screwing with people's lives here. So I'm inclined to do the whole project, or at least look at as many options.
And what we can do is we can set it up as an additive bid item for those items. So we would have a base bid that would be within budget, and then we would look at what that additive amount would be based on the prices as they come in, and then you would have the decision at that time, depending on what that number is, to either go for a loan or whatever to cover that gap.
Are we at
or
risk?
Scale it back.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, that's fine.
Are we at risk for signaling to contractors that we expect a high bid?
No.
Okay.
It's not out there. I mean, we've been very selective as far as who we've talked to, and again, they know what's already out there. There's, like I said, there's one contractor that's very interested in this, and I'm anticipating him to be very competitive. But it's half a dozen, half a dozen to the other. You know, all of a sudden we could have 20 people that bid on this job. You just don't know right now, who's looking for work this fall and next spring to fill up their schedules. So.
I have some really big concerns about taking out a $800,000 loan to pay for this. Not that I don't think it's important, it is very important.
Yeah.
But on a couple of different levels, we're already talking about increasing our water bills 14% over 3 years at each crack, and sewer also along that same line. How are we gonna pay for that? Add that cost on. And the biggest concern of going out and just getting a loan and finishing the project, are we then letting the Air Force off the hook or any other, potential grant money? I don't have a problem matching a grant, doing that type of thing, throwing money at that, but I don't want to see us start taking responsibility township-wise, because we can't afford that. I want to do the whole project, but maybe look at different avenues or something that we can do.
So what do we need to do if we were to start the bid process under an additive? This is the minimum we're going to do here, and then additive.
Yeah,
beyond that.
basically, based on the discussion tonight and your decision, I will revise the evidence of commitment of funds that shows that breakdown as far as what is already earmarked for the project, how we're going to break the bid up, and then a determination at the time of bids on the township will have the option then of how to move forward, either just go with the base bid or go for a loan, or between now and then, if additional funding comes available or whatever, to add that to the project. But basically, USDA will allow to move forward with that, and we can get this thing out for bid. Again, we still might be able to get it under construction this fall, or at the worst case scenario, it would start as soon as the ground allowed us in the spring. And it would probably, the size of the project, and as far as the production rate for the contractors, it would be essentially wrapped up. Main line would be done probably by Memorial Day of next year, or early June.
So just so I'm clear, you said worst case scenario is the spring. That is worst case scenario for me. Like, that's borderline unacceptable. All indications coming into this board and going out from this board to the public have been that it was going to be 2019. And so whatever we can do to still get that to happen is very important to me. Phase one was rough, indicating certain things to the community, and then having to change those things was, I don't want to do that again, so whatever we can do to still get the bids out, start the process tonight, get it out as soon as possible, so we have every opportunity, and we're doing everything we possibly can to make sure it's still this year.
And everything that we did in going forward with the loan before, they're going to accept as far as already being in place. So it's not like we're going to have to start from day one if the township decides to go with a loan process. So we will look at everything to expedite it to even if it's just getting the connection at Cedar Lake and Loud accomplished and the railroad crossing down there done this fall. We, as far as something under construction this fall. So.
I make a motion that we go forward with the bid process at 2,000 feet short with an additive system to go all the way up to Phelan Creek.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Weed, support by Mr. Palmer.
What's an additive system?
They would then have a rate associated with how much further along they would go. So the next 100 feet would cost so much, and then we can determine what amount of money is remaining as to how much farther we can go.
So we've got options to the bid.
Yeah, their bid would come in, all the additional length of pipe, hydrants and all that stuff would be additive. As far as we wanted to go up, we would add that to that base bid based on the funding available.
Okay.
I see.
Any other comments?
Question, what does that do with, for our need to have to come up with a loan? Does it put that off for now because we're dealing
We'll
with
find out at
increments,
that
or-
point, once we know what the bids come in as, if we need to do a loan, or if by that time we found another funding option.
Or if bids come in reasonably.
Correct.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Roll call.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Gieske,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed.
And can I say something?
Yes.
That I would hope that the community takes note that the township board is gonna do whatever we can to get this done this year, that we are committed to figuring out a way. This is extremely disheartening and disappointing. Hopefully, hopefully it's just a numbers issue, and that in reality, things work out very well.
Sure.
But that the township, the board, with this vote, is committed to moving forward this year.
Appraisal for the Huron Shores Artisan Hall.
All right, so based on previous discussions with the township board, the township attorney obtained a quote for $2,500 to have the Huron Shores Artisan Hall appraised. This would require a 50% deposit for retainer, and the process would take approximately 6 weeks. The appraisal requires township board approval.
I make a motion we do not do an appraisal for the Artisan Hall.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Weed, support by Mr. Palmer.
This is not just a postponement, this is,
Correct.
don't do one, okay?
Can I ask why?
I don't think it's necessary for this amount of cost here to come up with a number that we probably already know.
Okay, all right. Just wanted to make sure I wasn't left out of a conversation or something. I don't know.
I agree that the projected, the estimated cost is high. My one concern is that we probably know the number, but having it on a piece of paper from an appraiser is another matter to actually stand on. But I see your point. I do think it's high.
Okay.
Any other comments?
Do you have support for that?
Yes. Motion by Mr. Weed, support by Mr. Palmer.
It was quick.
Roll call.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Gieske,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine. Yes. Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Resolution ordinances. Resolution 2019-23, Oscoda Township Policy Subcommittee.
All right, so this is based on previous conversations with the township board. And what this does is this formalizes the process to move forward with the Oscoda Township Policy Subcommittee, and it outlines the members and the process.
So will we have to post the open meetings because there'll be a quorum?
Yes.
In that vein, if we would like to meet, and we probably would like to meet soon, it probably wouldn't hurt just at least discussing it at this meeting. I don't know, it's something, again, to get clarification on about if we need to act on it as a board or just a subcommittee, but to get started, it probably doesn't hurt to act on it. We've got everybody here that would need to check their schedule. So, I just throw some times out there.
Let's
Yeah,
work on the
yeah,
resolution
sure.
first.
That's a good point.
Any comments regarding the resolution? Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve Resolution 2019-23, forming the Policy Subcommittee.
Support. Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Weed. Roll call.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Gieske,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. All right, scheduling the first meeting. Tomorrow?
That would work with me.
I'm just kidding. Not enough
Okay,
posting time.
okay. We put that to the test last meeting.
I couldn't make that. We have a subcommittee meeting at 10. About Thursday.
Thursday works for me, just try not 11 to 1.
I would not be able to attend Thursday.
How about the next Thursday?
It's the 5th. And that's packet day.
Yeah, we can stay away from Thursdays.
Wednesday the 4th? Morning? 10:30?
If we could go a little earlier.
Yeah.
I'll be alone until 1 o'clock.
How about afternoon? How about 1:30?
Works for me.
Do we think it will wrap up before end of day?
Yes.
Okay. So just 2-hour block?
2-hour block.
2 hours. This is just for the subcommittee, for the policy, so
Sure.
Mr. Palmer, Ms. McGuire, Mr. Weed, myself, and Mr. Schaefer were appointed to it.
Okay, God, so I don't
So,
need to worry
might be
about
good
that.
news to you, yeah, yeah.
Dodge that bullet.
So 1:30 on the 4th?
Yes.
In Dave's office?
Do you want to put
Sure.
the agenda? Okay, John
Sure.
will.
Yep.
John will post the agenda.
All right, I make a motion, the first subcommittee for policies meeting be at 4 September, 1:30 PM at the Township Hall.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Weed, support Ms. McGuire. Roll call.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Gieske,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Resolution 2019-25, millage rate.
All right, this is directly related to the public hearing associated as the assessor explained. This is only the second year in a row that we've had to do this because the overall projections showed revenue go up by 2.2%. Anytime we have to increase the amount of money projected, we have to have a public hearing, and this resolution solidifies after the public hearing the truth in taxation process.
Comments? Is there a motion?
Yes. I move that we do adopt Resolution 2019-25 regarding the new millage rate.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Byer, support by Mr. Gieske. Roll call.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Gieske,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Resolution 2019-26, opt out of recreational marijuana.
All right, so this is a resolution that was discussed as a topic at the Planning Commission meeting on the 5th of August. The consensus from the Planning Commission was that the recommendation be made to opt out of recreational marijuana. What's contained, what was emailed out was the same information to the Planning Commission. Basically, the emergency declaration from the regulatory agency. It was dated the 3rd of July, 2019, so it came out right before the 4th of July. In a nutshell, it states that the regulatory agency does not know the rules on which it is supposed to regulate recreational marijuana. That has not been established by the legislature, and that then creates problems as far as being able to regulate recreational marijuana. Before moving forward with a formal ordinance that would solidify the township's opt-out, I wanted to be able to discuss with the board this resolution and gain consensus as far as if the board would like to opt out. There is a process that you would see on the next township board meeting on the 9th of September, where an ordinance that would be incorporated into the code associated with a opt-out of recreational marijuana. At that point, the township board could wait until the legislature and the regulatory agency understands the regulations associated with recreational marijuana, and at that point, it could be brought forward again to the township board as far as opting back in, once we know what the rules are.
Comments?
Did we add this to the agenda?
Yes,
Was it amended agenda Friday or before?
No, we just did it here.
we just
Did
did it
we?
here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
It
At the
may have-
beginning.
It may have escaped my note-taking, so that's good. I only had, okay, very good. Perfect. Oh, I have it here. Can't read my writing.
When we removed number 2.
Great confidence in the clerk. Can't read my writing. All right. That's what recordings are for. All right, thank you. Very good.
Any other comments?
So are you recommending that we table this, postpone it, or vote no on it tonight?
The resolution
yes, or whatever.
2019-26
Yeah.
is an indication as far as if the board wants to move forward with a recommendation from the planning committee, from the planning commission. Based on that, this opt-out would have to be in ordinance form. If the township board would want to move forward, on the next meeting, you would see ordinance form of this. That ordinance would look exactly like the resolution in ordinance format. If that ordinance were to be passed by the township board on the September 9th meeting, then that would need to be filed with Laura down in Lansing and
So-
licensing and regulatory affairs.
To answer your question, I'm recommending that the board approves this resolution to opt out of recreational marijuana until the state figures out how they're going to do laws regarding recreational marijuana. The state's kind of having a reset on how they're going to deal with this since
That's a
the
nice
previous
word.
committees associated with it did not do so well.
So that was a motion.
Well, on July 3rd, they passed emergency rules put in place to regulate, because they have to begin taking, under the statute, taking applications by December 6th. And under the Administrative Procedures Act of 1969, sets out procedures that the state has to follow to put these sort of things into place. And there was not sufficient time to get that done with legislative action to set permanent rules in place. So that act allows them to put emergency rules in place so that they can begin taking the licenses. The option is it's only good for 6 months. This rules that they put in place are good for 6 months, and then they have the ability at the end of 6 months to extend one time for another 6 months. So these rules can only be at the maximum good for 1 year, and then whatever the legislature comes up with guidelines for rules that will be in place permanently, they'll be determining that over the course of years. So that was the reason that the Planning Commission our thought was, well, first of all, it's this board's choice to either opt in or opt out. If the board were to say, well, no, we want to opt in, then we wouldn't have to do anything because the state has set this. But our thought was to opt out until we know what the rules are, so we can, if at some later point we decide to opt in for recreational, which, in my opinion, all this is going to be decided in the courts over the next couple of years. So it makes sense for us to opt out at this point until the rules are set, so everybody knows we're all on the same playing field when it comes to figuring all this out. So that's where we came to that decision.
I move that we accept Resolution 2019-26.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Cummings, support by Mr. Nordine. Roll call?
Mr. Gasky.
Yes.
Ms. McGuire.
Yes.
Mr. Byer.
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Palmer.
Yes.
Mr. Cummings.
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed.
We need to extend the meeting.
Yep. Do we have a motion regarding the time of the meeting now that we are close to 9:30?
I'll make a motion that we continue the meeting till we're finished with the agenda.
Support.
Motion by Ms. McGuire, support by Mr. Nordine. Roll call?
Mr. Palmer.
Yes.
Mr. Byer.
Yes.
Ms. McGuire.
Yes.
Mr. Cummings.
Yes.
Mr. Gasky.
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. CVB request for appointment of committee member to Pure Michigan Trail Town.
All right, I sent out the most recent email that I got concerning the committee that's being formed. So right now, the original ask was for one committee member to be appointed by the township board, and then there would be 2 meetings over the next 5 weeks associated with that. So they have now established that the meeting on the 4th would be at noon. And so that would then be the first meeting. There would be a commitment for another meeting over the next 5 weeks to make that happen. The CVB has hired a firm to be able to come help them with the Pure Michigan Trail Town designation. And so the chamber, the CVB, the schools, the township, as well as Oscoda Township will be working to be able to, working towards the designation of Trail Town.
Comments? We have a volunteer?
I would be willing to take that on since I'm involved with the IET committee. I think the two kind of go together.
I make a motion, Mr. Palmer be our appointment for the committee member of the Pure Michigan Trail Town.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Weed, support by Mr. Gajewski.
The only problem I see here is we've just scheduled a policy committee at 1:30 on the 4th. Getting me out of there in time.
Roll call?
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Palmer.
Yes.
Ms. McGuire.
Yes.
Mr. Byer.
Yes.
Mr. Cummings.
Yes.
Mr. Gajewski.
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Bad debt write-off for $7.25.
All right, what you have is a memo from the utility billing specialist associated with the bad debt write-off. What you also have in there is the, in the packet contains the opinion associated with bad debt write-off that it cannot be included in the sale of a at the sheriff's auction. So basically, when the auction goes through, a municipality is prohibited from requiring the payment of that bad debt before connecting utility services.
Any comments? Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the bad debt write-off for $7.25.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Byer. Roll call?
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Bad debt write-up for $607.65.
So this is the much more painful bad debt write-off associated with $607.65. And again, Township is not able to collect this before hooking up the new owner.
Any comments?
My only comment on this one is that from looking at the history, and we discussed this a little bit Friday morning, that it looks like a payment wasn't collected on this account, and I could be overlooking something, but it looks like a payment wasn't collected on this account since February of 2018. It's like it's a year and a half. I don't know what led up to that, but I mean, the situation is what it is at this point, but just.
Was it sewer only?
Yes, it is. It appears that way.
So
just
it
from what
couldn't
I'm
be
looking
shut
at.
off just
That's
for
the
the
problem.
court's
There you
knowledge?
go. Yeah, okay.
Can't shut
That
off.
answers that.
Okay.
All right.
And so my understanding is with our new ordinance, we won't have these problems in the future?
We are working to rectify these situations, along with the payment policies associated with utilities.
Any other comments? Is there a motion?
I move we go ahead with the recommendation on a bad debt write-off of $607.65.
Is there support?
Support.
Motion by Mr. Byer, support by Mr. Cummings. Roll call?
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. All right, last item. The Michigan PFAS Action Response Team is establishing a community advisory board. I'm looking for the township to appoint a representative to be on this board. There is an application that needs to be filled out. I am requesting that I be the one. I'm volunteering for that position. I was already involved with their committee in actually establishing the application process. And I would like to continue on with the MPART to affect resolving our PFAS issues. Unless we have others that want to volunteer.
I'm interested, but I think I'm not going to arm wrestle you over it. I think you would be great for it.
Thanks.
Go forth and prosper.
I move we appoint Supervisor Weed to this board.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Byer, support by Mr. Cummings. Roll call?
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed.
Before we go any further, item 2 under other, I heard earlier was just eliminated. Was that at the request of the originator of the request?
That was actually not removed from the previous meeting's agenda, so it was accidentally left in this one.
Clerical error.
I see.
That was my oversight.
All right.
All right, second public comment period. Anyone may speak, 4-minute time limit. If you have comments, or, yeah, please, if you have something, come to the podium and introduce yourself.
Mark Miller, Oscoda. I'll keep it quick since it's after 9:30 and everybody wants to go home. First of all, I want to thank you all for approving the advertisement for an economic development person. It's well needed. Air Force left 25 years ago. We ought to be further along. Many of you raised valid concerns, but if you have adequate controls on the contract and somebody supervising what this individual is doing, you'll be okay. Last thing is, I don't want to happen with what happened to Develop by Osco. 4 to 5 years, no work product, except a broadband contract, and they canceled the press conference. Jamie's valid question, accumulate the costs and build the Air Force when you can. And a final question on the Artesian Hall, was that funded with the grant? And if so, do you have to return part of the grant when you sell the building? And thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Greg Cole, 4507 Van Etten Dam Road. I heard what I wanted to talk about is when we were talking about the phase 1 water main and then going into the phase 2, I'm sitting there and I can see the stress that I want you not to forget Air Force. Jamie mentioned it. The Air Force is putting this stress on our township, on our community, and I want to thank you all for doing the best you can for what you're up against. I know that there's hardly any communication. You have to fight for every any kind of communication from the Air Force, and then even the state. So I don't want you to forget that this stress, we have a couple avenues. We have a RAB meeting coming up September 11th. The time has changed to 5 o'clock. It's not going to start at 5:30. That's what I was told. At the beginning of that meeting, there'll be time for the public to come in. And so let's take this stress to these people at the RAB meeting. Let's make public comment and let them know. I know we've been doing it time and time again, but let's just not give up. Keep telling them and showing them that they need to do their part. Now in New Mexico, there was litigation brought against the Air Force. So that's something that could be done. It's, I hear that, you can't go up against the feds, you can't go up against the military, but you can. But I just, like Mark said, document what's going on here, and don't forget that they could, down the road, pay for the bills that you guys are struggling and fighting for right now. So I would like to bring that up. And then the other thing is the Now Group. We're going to be having a meeting the 3rd Thursday of September. We haven't had meetings here for a while. We took a break, but we're still working hard. Things that you don't see that we're working on. And I invite Mr. Weed to be at the Now meeting if he can, because we would like to see some updates that you have for us, especially now that you're going to have the Impart team and you're going to be representing the township at that. We would like to see the information coming from that. So just don't forget that the Air Force is responsible, I feel, and I think many of you know that contamination is coming. Those plumes are coming off that base, under the lake, and over to Loud Drive. There's no doubt about it. And they don't want to be responsible for anything outside those gates. and we have to keep making a noise about that. So, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? All right, then board comment. Any comments?
I got two. First, our drop-off program is coming up on September 14th. However, we do have a location change. I do have 5 people that have purchased their permits. I mailed them a notice to, hopefully they get them and open the mail and read it, but it has been changed to Travis Sanitation, which is located on Kings Corner Road. If you're not sure where that is, give us a call at 739-7471. We'll be happy to give you directions there, or also you can call Travis Sanitation at 739-5244. Again, the location for the drop-off program has been changed from Sunrise to Travis Sanitation, located on Kings Corner Road.
For what reason, Jamie?
I'm not sure. Circumstances beyond our control.
Because I thought he signed contract for 2 times for the year.
Yeah, well, they're not going to be able to fulfill that at this time.
Really?
And the other thing I had is last Monday on the 19th of August, I had an opportunity to join the Forest Service and Oscoda Canoe Rental to do the cleanup the Osable River trip. They asked me if I wanted to help out, and I was happy to do it. I'll tell you, it was definitely an excellent experience. Everybody likes to float down the river and have a good time, but unfortunately there's a lot of garbage floating in the river and some that's been there for a very long time. Actually, some of the finds that we had there had about 25 people that were out there. About half of them were in the water, and I got to do a little bit of the snorkeling and stuff like that. And it's a lot of hard work with them when there's a current going on, let me tell you. I did find a Pabst Blue Ribbon can that was from the late 70s because it still had the old pull tab thing on it. That was my super find. However, a couple of the other people that were very diligent about it, Carrie from the Forest Service, she found one of the old logging hooks from the logging days, which was very cool. They found a motorcycle fender from 1970-something. They found a few things that we couldn't get because the current was too strong, but we know where they're located in next year. But if anybody would like to help out with that, it's a great day. The weather was beautiful, and the water was still warm, so that was good.
Yes.
And special thanks to Oscoda Canoe Rental and to the Forest Service.
And just as a repeating what was mentioned earlier by Mr. Cole when he was at the podium, that we have another RAB meeting. It is September 11th, and it is earlier. It's 5 p.m. here at the library for the usual 2-hour fun period.
I'll be seeing Mr. Miller in Traverse City. Next meeting is the 9th, is a Monday, and I'll be attending the Space Symposium, driving across the state to come back here at 7 p.m. for the board meeting. So might have an update on the Space Symposium.
Nice.
Any other comments? Mr. Miller, to address your question, there is a grant for the Artisan Hall that we do have to pay back, and we've already done our mathematical calculations to compensate for that. This for the Phase 2 water main section is very unfortunate, but like Mr. Nordine said, we are going to work hard on seeing how we can do as much as we can with the resources we're given.
Agreed.
Anything else? I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We are adjourned.